Dr. Amos is going to set up on them so that you can see what it looks like on the live course, not just in the slide. So we talked about first the PI iliums. Remember, posterior, inferior. They get stuck in a posterior inferior configuration, and you want to stand opposite the side of the listing on something tall enough where you can get the proper LOC. So this would be a setup for a which one? For a right PI, correct? Okay, so he's contacting his segmental contact point is the tuber sacrale. He's using his inferior hand as the contact hand, stabilizing with his superior hand, the one toward the head. His thrust is going to be in an LOC, basically 65 degrees, remember, the angle of the SI? And it's going to be toward the tubercoxy on the same side. So it's going to look like that.
It looks like a lot different angle than the dog. Why is that?
Well, the angle's a little different because of the angle of the SI joints is different. We kind of touched on that last night. We were talking about the SI angle, the sacroiliac angle in a pig that I adjusted. I have no idea what the number is, but it doesn't matter what the quadruped is, as long as your angle is toward that ASI has the tubercoxy on the same side. So the number's kind of immaterial, except for here in the AVCA, you're probably going to want to know what that number is.
And that number is?
65.
Very good. Okay. So that was the first way. There's 3 different ways to do this. That's probably, for most of us, the preferred way, except for Dr. Andis, this is his preferred adjustment. An alternative setup would be to use the tubercoxy as your segmental contact point. He's going to contact that with his superior hand, and the LOC is going to be straight toward the ground, all P to A. Remember that, again, you've got to get high enough. He's basically aiming again from his episternal notch down through his hands and his contact point. You guys see all that?
Yes.
Okay. And his LOC and thrust are going to be down, straight down toward the ground, just like that. Remember, that's a long lever move, so you don't have to use as much force with that one. When might you not be able to use that one, however? Sorry? Yeah, exactly. If for some reason,
Does everybody know what a knockdown hip is?
no.
Tell them.
No?
So this tuber, sometimes if they run, especially if they run through a stall door and they hit the door, they can hit their hip on the door, and it just takes that cap and knocks it off. It's called knockdown because it usually goes down. You put your hand up there to find it, and there's like nothing there. It is. It's just knocked down.
You have the wing of the pelvis is like this. If he's facing this way, you've got the wing of the pelvis going out here like this, and on the end of that is a growth plate that doesn't really fuse to the rest of the pelvis until vets help me out. I think it's around age 3, between 3 and 4 it fuses along in there. And so that's very susceptible to when they run through, they'll hit the end of that growth plate and they'll shear it off. And when it shears off, it'll go into the inguinal area over in here. Or plank area, sorry.
It's H5.
H5? Okay. So typically when you see this knockdown hip, generally, not always, but generally it's an indication that it was done prior to age 5, when it's more susceptible to that type of an injury. And so you'll just have kind of a concave area in here instead of this protuberance right there.
Does
Okay?
it affect how the hip moves?
To my knowledge, I was going to say, to my knowledge, it doesn't really have any detrimental effects long term. I mean, I've seen horses, old horses that have had it and work without really any issues.
There's a little bit of a compromise as far as there'll always be a little bit weak on here because you have all these muscles that tie into that. But for the most part, they'll be able to perform. It's just like with a dressage horse, it may prevent them from getting to the upper level, like Pre-Sacro Grand Prix, something like that. They may hit a level and just not be physically able to proceed to the next level.
May not make the NFR, but
Yeah.
I've seen in race horses where it does affect the gait of the gallop. If it's a slower speed, you can't tell hardly, but if you start
sometimes the owners don't even know that it's there. I mean, I've had clients bring horses to me, and I'll be checking them out, and I'll, you know, as part of my motion, I'll go in motion, and I'll say, when did he knock that hip down? And they go, what? So when did he knock that hip down? I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
You didn't see this over here? No, I had no idea. So sometimes the owners may not even know.
And I've caught them, after they've gone through their vet check, and the vets miss it.
So yes, go ahead.
So if you're adjusting a really young animal, is there a danger that we could do damage to that growth plate?
No, it takes too much force. I mean, I've adjusted foals that had an AS, ilium, and it would take something, you know, it's kind of a velocity type injury. You've got to have that speed in conjunction with this stationary object combined to shear it off. So yeah.
If you had a big concern about that, what could you do? Use an alternate technique, right? That's why we show you a couple of different things. Okay, any questions about those first two?
It's basically,
The third way that you could do that is you could also use that same tubercoxy as your segmental contact point, and you can stand on the ground instead of having to get on a bale, and it's actually a pull. So again, the segmental contact is the tubercoxy. The contact point is the superior hand with the inferior hand on top. They're cupped over that. It's kind of a nice purchase right there. You can grab a hold of it, and it's going to be a pull straight down toward the ground. Again, it's a long lever, so it doesn't take as much force.
and you got to get up underneath the horse because your line of correction is straight P to A. So you got to get your elbows up underneath, and you got to be here, pull down. Okay? Come right here on that side. It's like this. You got to get in here close and then pull straight down. Okay? I don't like that. You're already in the kick zone. Now you're getting up underneath. And so,
Do that again. Now, you see the position he's in? If you pull a heavy bone like this and you're standing away, you can tear up your pecs. You can tear your shoulder up. So he's close in like this, much less chance of you getting hurt too, by the way, when you do a pull on a heavy segment like that. So that's the other reason for that.
If you notice, you remember I made a comment yesterday about stabilization. How when you have to have it, you have to have it. If you don't have to have it and you stabilize anyway, it's okay. I'm just standing here with my hand in his hip. He's such a wild man, he's about to tear up the barn anyway. But I just out of force of habit, I'm just kind of standing here so he knows I'm here and he's not going to start sidestepping away.
any question on the PI?
So any one of those three is okay.
Basically.
It's your choice. If we give you a listing on the exam and we just say set up for a left PI, you get to choose any one of those three. We don't care which one you use. But again, we may ask you a question about your LOC, your contact point, or whatever. So also remember the SCP, CP, that stuff is so important. That's why we harp on it. So the next adjustment would be for an AS ilium. Remember, the ilium gets stuck anterior and superior, and the idea is to unlock it, move it the other way. So again, the tubercoxy is the segmental contact point, and like we aimed with the PI, we aimed from the tuberous sacrale to the tubercoxy. Now the LOC is just the opposite way, so he's aiming from the tubercoxy toward the tuberous sacrale at that same 65-degree angle. So he's got to get in a wide open fencer stance in order to get low enough. You can see that his fencer stance is wide open. He's low enough to bring that angle straight up through that sacroiliac joint. The difference with this one is that it's a kind of a hold, and you hold it, and at the end, you put a little thrust in it at the end. So if you're, a couple things with body position on that, if you get in there and you hold it with your elbows all the way extended, what happens? You can't really thrust, can you? You gotta kind of put your body into it, and it's called close pack. You'll close pack your elbows. So whenever you set up, do not ever set up with fully extended elbows. All right, 'cause you'll
Remember
kill.
yesterday we talked about bringing your hands in front of you and the natural bend you have, that's what you want. So we take this natural bend, we come up, and there it is. Bend in the elbow like you want.
And again, I'm just have a hand here so he knows somebody's here that's sidestepping away. We talked about sometimes with the motion, when you motion those, they may help you with that when they may lean into you. Even a horse this size, if you're underneath there and you're trying to hold that up and he's leaning into you, they get pretty heavy. You get some of these big butted 1,500-pound quarter horses that try to lean into you. And I mean, I've literally had them pick their leg off the ground and lean into me. And they get pretty heavy. You know, you can't hold them. I'm sorry, I'm gonna pick on you because you're very slender and thin and vertically challenged somewhat. It's hard to hold them up. It's just even as big as we are, it's hard to hold them up. Yes, sir.
In a perfect situation, how long will you apply that pressure?
That's a good question, everybody. I don't have really, the answer that I usually give is, they will mostly tell you when they've had enough. That, especially if they lean into you, they will actually pull away and pull away from you. And as they pull away. Anymore, I mentioned yesterday that I'm getting old enough now that I can't hold them as long as I used to. So when I've had about enough too, I'm hoping that they have, and I usually just give a thrust to get them off me.
I usually wait until they kind of pick up their foot.
Right, and that's usually the main indicator is when they pick it up and start to move away. The other thing that I've seen a lot of times is we talk about this angle, how to get that correct angle. Sometimes you'll set up on that and they'll take a step forward or a step back. And if he goes forward, then you gotta kind of realign yourself and then move again. I think they're trying to tell you, I know you got the right angle, but that's not the right one for me. And so, correct me if I'm wrong. If they reset it, if I'm set here and they reset it, I'm gonna go with what they tell me. Because they know better than we do what they need, right? Any questions on the AS, first AS?
So when they do step up or step back, you still maintain, you don't want to square them back up?
They will usually square themselves up. They're just resetting, like I said, they're just kind of resetting this LOC that you get, they're just moving it, they're tweaking it a little bit themselves.
You
So
say
you don't do
step, but a lot of times they'll just kind of twist forward,
Yeah.
twist back,
Oh,
and
okay.
just slightly change the angle that you're at.
Right. Thank you.
Let me add one more thing. You keep switching yourself around and keep getting positions, and it ain't working for you, right? You don't need to adjust it. Keep that in mind. You're running about, how the horse teach, the horse telling you, see? That's what he's talking about. If you keep switching around and getting all these different positions, it's not working. The horse keeps moving away from you, you're on the wrong side.
You'll see all kinds of stuff with these. I've even had them just kind of move and then lift the leg up and then lean into you. So, again, cases like that, they're just telling you, this is where I want you to do it. Any questions on the first AS? Okay, we talked about if that's not there, as an alternate technique, you can use the ischial tuberosity, tubericii as a segmental contact. Again, if you look, the superior hand is the contact hand, stabilizing with the other hand. Remember, the superior hand's one toward the head, right? Inferior one toward the tail. Stabilizing. The LOC again is straight P to A, or straight toward the ground. It's not a drop, it's really a thrust. Hang on one second. It's a thrust straight down. So again, get tall enough where you can get the proper LOC. Yes, sir.
It seems like his right foot was back on that one.
His right foot. His right hind?
No.
Oh,
Yeah.
doctor's foot. Okay.
Yeah, so he had his superior
Well,
hand that he was
yeah,
using.
but
to his-
I'm trying to balance myself.
But we would want it that way, yeah. I don't know, I'm just trying to
Typically, we talk about this every module, and typically it's, you're gonna, the arm and hand that's forward is gonna be the leg on the same side forward. I think it's a martial arts thing, right? Is it right, martial arts? Somebody here's talking about martial arts. It's a martial arts thing, you wanna have the leg and hand on the same side forward. So typically that's what we say.
Remember I said in class, scissors stance league, that's not 100%. Remember I said that?
Yeah.
This isn't.
It's power, it's a power
To
thing.
me, for me to get closer to him, I've got to get this leg out of the way so I can get in here close to him. So this would be one of those where it
Just
doesn't
trying to
fall
note the
too much.
exception. Yeah.
And you see his hands not extended in front of his body, it's right beside his body, you see that? So you're not have a higher probability of injuring yourself. It's when you're thrusting away from the body.
Okay, is that all right?
Remember, those are both long lever moves too, so you're not gonna use a lot of force on either one of those. Any questions on the either, one of the two AS moves? Okay, you see those fairly commonly, as I mentioned, I think yesterday. Most of the time, you'll find an AS in combination with a PI on the opposite side. If you ask all of us individually, we'll probably all give you a different answer. But the times that I can remember seeing an AS by itself is when somebody, other than a certified animal chiropractor that's been properly trained in a course like this, has tried to adjust an animal, and I think they just missed it. They just didn't see it for some reason. That's when I've seen the AS by itself. As far as the correction of them, if you have PI on one side, AS on the other, typically I will adjust the PI first. I think everybody's pretty much on the same page on that. Adjust the PI first, go back and recheck it, then go back and recheck. Usually I'll go back and recheck to see if the AS is still there. And if it is, then I'll adjust it. Okay, anything else on either one of those? You guys good on those? Okay, base posterior sacrum. I'm not standing in a real, I wouldn't be standing here if there's anybody else than crunchy, but I'm trying to get out of y'all's way too. Base posterior sacrum, remember the base of the sacrum, the top of the triangle, palpate somewhat higher than normal, or posterior. So the segmental contact point is S, how many? 2, because S2 is the first one you can get to. So superior hand, pisiform, or the right above it on S2, stabilizing with the inferior hand, equal and opposite elbow bend. Again, LOC, episternal notch over the top, straight down through. It's going to be a straight P to A, LOC, straight toward the ground. Does it matter what side you stand on those? No, it doesn't matter. You can do it from either side. Even after I graduated in '78, so after almost 40 years of doing this, I still prefer my right hand. I'm still somewhat right-handed dominant. So given the choice, I'll set up with my right hand. Any questions on a base posterior? So the next one would be, since Jim's on that side, a right base posterior sacrum. So instead of the base being elevated, it's just kind of elevated on one side. So the right side would statically palpate higher than the left. So instead of being on top of the second sacral tubercle, he's going to be just lateral to it. And it's not more than about a finger's width difference. Okay, it's real small. So just going to slide a little bit lateral to the tubercle, and everything else is the same. Does it matter what side you do that from? Yes, it does. Why? Because you have to use a superior hand. Why? Because if you use the inferior hand, look what he covers. He covers both SIs and possibly could influence the inter-transverse as well. So it does matter what side, and it does matter what hand on these. If it was a left base posterior, what would he have to do? Go around to the other side. Right.
And on the horse, anytime you're doing a straight P to A, make sure that your elbows are right in line with the spine. Okay, you don't want to be like this. Okay, so make sure that your elbows line up with the spine. And when you're talking about a straight P to A, your external notch is right here. Your eyes are going to be about 4 inches in front, so you can use that as a gauge. If you're looking straight down and you're about 4 inches in front of where your contact is, you've got a pretty, because it's hard to tell sometimes your angle. So if you get in the habit of looking about 4 inches in front of your contact, you'll be almost straight P to A.
I think we're all very visual, and we tend to use our eyes to aim at things because that's what we do. And so we tend to want to look down where our contact is, your LC is going to be off. The other thing that's very important here is we talked about yesterday with both of those moves, the angle of the croup. He's fairly flat in here. If his croup or his sacrum was really slanted, I mentioned Appaloosas are kind of bad that way, and some quarter horses are the same way. So if his croup, instead of being this way, was like that, Dr. Ennis would have to modify his stance to get perpendicular with that. And sometimes it can be kind of awkward. They've been so slammed, you've really got to get your body contorted to get that proper LOC. If you don't, you lose points. So we talked about the inter-transverse, how it was relegated pretty much to horses. I think rhinos are the only other ones that have an inter-transverse. Dr. G, is that right? Do you know?
I haven't adjusted very many rhinoceroses in my life. You know.
Well, if you do, they probably have an
They probably have an inter-transverse, yeah. I know dogs and cats don't, I
Yeah,
know.
dogs and cats do not.
No.
It's there for a reason. God had a plan in mind when he did that. I think he put it there as an extra sort of stabilizer to that lumbosacral area. It's just an additional joint between the last lumbar and the base and the sacrum. So, it's easy to find. If you find the tuberous sacrale, you're just going to roll off a little bit. Don't be more than 2 inches off the spine, really about 1.5 inches. But there's a little hole you'll fall in. Remember when we talked yesterday about the sacral notch in the dogs, how I showed you how to roll off and it's right there? This is kind of the same way. We'll show you in labs today. You're just going to roll off, you'll roll right into it.
About a 45-degree angle off the.
You just almost can't miss it. So he's going to use his inferior hand pisiform to set up on it. Again, an elevated surface, high enough to get the proper LOC. The LOC again is straight down to the ground. The caveat is there's a little rocking motion at the end of it. So you're going to rock your fingers forward at the end of that movement. We talked about it yesterday. Do you remember why we put that in there? Because that joint is concave convex. It has a concave convex orientation to it. And in order to make it move properly in its plane, in its facet plane or joint plane, you've got to put that little rocking motion at the end of it. Okay. Typically, we will ask you to show us in the air what your thrust looks like. If you do not put that rocking motion in, you will lose points. Yes, sir.
Still a little confused from yesterday. Can you palpate that subluxation, or are you finding it on your exam specifically?
There'll
Yes.
be some point tenderness in there.
Oh, okay.
I was thinking last night about your question. I asked Dr. Casillo, Dr. Kitchens yesterday. Sorry, I just say
I'm used to it, it's okay, I'm pretty used to Casilla myself, so.
There's a Prevagen commercial on TV now, if you guys see it. It opens up by saying your mind is a wonderful thing. And my wife goes, yeah, but yours is not, because she does not want to get inside my head. And I don't blame her. But sometimes I was thinking about your question last night. And I hardly ever say always or never, because when you say never, that's what you wind up doing, right? So I hardly ever say never. But I always check that as part of my sacral pelvic exam.
Just with pressure.
I always, if you're going to motion it, my analysis is a little bit different, but if you're going to motion, what I would suggest to you is motion the SI, motion the inter-transverse. Just always do it as part of your sacral pelvic exam, because you will find that involved quite a bit. It's just going to be there. And I think, as we mentioned, you can't totally clear that pelvis out unless you clear out that inter-transverse subluxation as well.
Great.
Anything else on inter-transverse? Okay. The last one we talk about is a sacral apex.
You wanna turn this back, that way?
The last one we talk about is a sacral apex. There's 2 different ways you can do that one as well, a push or a pull. Typically, I think somebody asked yesterday, do a lot of us do a push or a pull move? I think typically we push. It's faster, you have more power because you're using your pecs, your pecs and your triceps as part of that contraction to push with. So you've got a lot more power pushing. So this particular setup would be the setup for a apex, how many? Right, correct, an apex right. So it's got a segmental contact point is the sacral, apex of the sacrum, sacral notch, right? Same as in the dog, sacral notch. He's going to stabilize the PSIS on the opposite side with a superior hand. Just got to hook your fingers in there to stabilize it.
And so it's set up on this side?
Yeah, we will. We'll turn around just a second. The LOC is going to be straight, lateral to medial. So straight across. His elbow was pretty perpendicular to the ground, straight across. It's not a scissors move, it's a one-handed thrust. The stabilizing hand just holds and stabilizes. That would be an apex left push. Okay. This one does not move, this one pushes. It's the end of the day, Jim's tired, it's hot, it's 100 degrees outside, you're sweating your butt off. He has an apex right, and he's like, man, I just do not feel like walking around the other side. So he could pull. In that case, you're gonna just hook the sacral notch with a cup finger, stabilize the PSIS on the same side, and pull it toward you. Again, it's not a scissor, it's just a pull. Okay. Any questions on those? They're pretty not really self-explanatory, but they're pretty easy. You'll see those pretty commonly also. And these are all common subluxations, and you can see them in combination, and you typically will see them in combination with each other. So you'll see more than one on the same animal.